So welcome everybody to our June huddle. We have way too much to share with you. We wish we had nothing to share with you, but redistricting just keeps on keeping on. Here's our agenda for the evening. We're going to have a group scream because clearly we need it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. We're going to talk about the General Assembly maps and lawsuits, the congressional map and lawsuits. We're going to answer some of your questions, or try to anyway. Quite a number of folks sent in questions by email. We're going to talk about actions you can take. We're going to ask you to save a date in September for a volunteer appreciation picnic. And then we have quite a lot of links to share with you to newspaper articles that have come out in the past week or so. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Terser, who's going to be up next.
So I pulled out this political cartoon, and this is actually from, you'll notice the 2021 on it. And it has just felt like we've been in this time loop, where, the Constitution isn't being taken seriously, redistricting maps, are terrible, and people keep missing deadlines and not doing the right thing. And, the implementation of these reforms, our vision for fair maps that were transparently made in a bipartisan fashion that focused on keeping communities together has not, as you all know, it just has not come together at all smoothly, at all. And so, if you move to the next slide, Mia. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk us through kind of the most recent, kind of things that have happened with the Ohio House and Senate maps. I was not at all surprised that the 5th set of maps was struck down by the Ohio Supreme Court. Of course, the 5th set of maps were the same as the 3rd set of maps. And I think, it's incredibly painful to know that we're going to be going into August and those elections voting on maps that have been declared unconstitutional twice. And if you add that 4th one, 3 times, because that 4th set of maps was incredibly close. The Ohio Supreme Court ordered the Redistricting Commission to get together again. And on Friday, they were supposed to produce new maps. They didn't do anything. They didn't hold public hearings. They didn't meet. They literally did nothing. And, at this point, we're in this weird holding pattern because the Ohio Redistricting Commission did not act. And really, frankly, they didn't act because on May 27th, a panel of federal judges, and it's important to remember that 2 of them, Trump appointees, dictated that the Ohio Redistricting Commission use the 3rd set of maps. And they set the August 2nd primary as the primary for the state legislative maps. And I included Judge Marbley's comments here because I just think it's important to realize that we together passed a watershed constitutional reform. Voters overwhelmingly approved it. Voters anticipated good bipartisan map making that focused on keeping communities together. And we put good rules in the Ohio Constitution, not just keeping communities together, but also defining gerrymandering with a standard called representational fairness. Sometimes it's called proportionality. Having that metric in there to be really clear, hey, this is what gerrymandering is, was important because the Ohio Supreme Court pushed back over and over again using that metric. But the fact that constitutional officers chose not to actually listen to not just voters, but also to the Ohio Supreme Court, and to act so blasé as if it didn't matter at all that they actually had a deadline, is just incredibly painful. If you go to the next slide, Mia. I also wanted to highlight that one of the things that the panel did is they basically announced, essentially like, if you don't go to bed, I'll give you ice cream, as opposed to doing something that held the Ohio Redistricting Commission accountable for fair maps. For example, that federal panel could actually have chosen to identify a master map maker to create maps that would be fair, or to appoint a bipartisan independent map makers to create maps. And instead they said, hey, what we'll do is we'll use this third set of maps. And of course, that's what came to be, because of course the Ohio Redistricting Commission was, well, like, great, and we'll just pass the third set of maps all over again. And I think, a lot of times some of these legal decisions are not worth taking a little bit of time to read. I mean, they're just, they're a little dense. But I do, encourage you all to check out her concurring opinion, because it is well worth reading. And then I don't know if Tiffany's done this yet, but Tiffany, if you could throw into the chat, Michael Douglas from the Akron Beacon Journal did an op-ed that highlighted, the different parts that he found truly meaningful. And Tommy is just saying it would be really great that we actually use the map that the independent map makers created. The thing that, still kills me is how much money we've spent. Clearly $20 million on the new primary, but also so much money, $49,000 a piece on those independent map makers.
Yeah.
And then on that note, Mia, on to the next slide. So it just, this is just a reminder of what these districts look like. Now, the Secretary of State does have a tool, so you can actually look at your districts. You can check out your districts. You could also look at Dave's redistricting app just to see the kind of games that were played. Primarily, I would be looking at the urban areas as areas in which they did all sorts of weird manipulations, so that they created, strong GOP seats, and then, some Democratic seats, but toss-up seats. All right, well, on that note, I am gonna head it off. This time I'm heading to get to Mia.
Well, thank you. So we all know that, there have been a number of lawsuits that were filed against the maps, and that's why the, Supreme Court keeps saying they're unconstitutional, et cetera, et cetera. But since the federal court made its, decision on May 27th, saying that we have to use the third set of maps, there have been a proliferation of other lawsuits have kind of popped up. And I just wanted to walk you through a couple of those. So, and to discuss the reason why there have been so many. So first of all, there's been a lawsuit from a group of would-be Democratic candidates who want to run for Ohio House, but they haven't been able to because of the filing deadlines. So sorry, I'm going to just give me 1 second. So the filing deadline is supposed to be 90 days before the 90 days before the election. But instead of doing it 90 days before August 2nd, LaRose instructed BOEs to use the filing deadline of the primary that was at the beginning of May. But of course, we aren't actually having that election until August. So that really doesn't, make any sense. And there are 4 Democratic House candidates and 2 Democratic Central Party Committee members who are challenging that. But there's also a Republican who is challenging the filing deadlines, and she has challenged it in federal court, whereas the Democratic candidates filed to the Ohio Supreme Court. That has already been given an expedited schedule, and so briefs are being filed at the moment, and we hope that we'll hear something. It's not clear whether, let's say they won that case, it could be that just those people who filed the lawsuit are then allowed to run, or it might be that they say, okay, well, we open it up for another period, and any new candidates that want to file would be able to do so. So it's very unclear at the moment, but we hope to get some answers soon. There was also another lawsuit that was brought, this time from a Democratic state rep, Adam Miller, about residency requirements, because you're supposed to have 30 days to move residents, after the maps are drawn. But unfortunately, again, LaRose set that not after the final time that the map was adopted, but after the first time that the third set of maps was adopted. And at that time, Representative Miller was on active duty military service, and he was not in Ohio, and he was not able to file that form. So he has filed a lawsuit. There has also been a criminal complaint from the Democratic candidate for Attorney General against members of the Ohio Redistricting Commission for dereliction of duty, because after all, they are supposed to obey the Constitution, and they have not done that. So this is, a whole handful of lawsuits that have been filed, and we will find out in the next weeks, we hope, the answers to some of those things. I have put a lot of links at the very end of this presentation. Of course, we'll be sending it to you, and there's a number of newspaper articles with information about all of these lawsuits. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Colin, who's going to tell you about additional things that have been happening with various lawsuits.
Well, thanks, Mia, and good evening, everybody. Always a pleasure to be here with you. So what is the ongoing redistricting we have found ourselves in Ohio, a revolving door of lawsuits and motions? It's easy to forget that the maps that we are using currently as ordered by the federal court for General Assembly maps and also for congressional maps, those maps are still actively being challenged right now. And I wanted to first focus on the General Assembly maps. Yes, it is true what Catherine said is accurate. A federal panel essentially implemented the third map. And based on that decision, that is the map that we will be using for the 2022 elections only. Meanwhile, the maps are still currently being litigated, and we know that the Ohio Supreme Court, when they found that the third map was unconstitutional for the second time on May 25th, they gave the Redistricting Commission 11 days to meet and build a new General Assembly map in compliance with the Ohio Constitution. That deadline for producing a new map was June 6th, which was last Friday. And as we've already covered, that day came and went without a single hearing by the Redistricting Commission or any sort of movement towards complying with the Ohio Supreme Court order. So in response, the three groups that have been filing these lawsuits
I'm gonna just boot that person out of the meeting. Just give me a minute. Sherry Williams, I am booting you. Hold on one second.
So Mia, how did that happen?
Well, people are able to draw. Okay, I have removed that person. I'm gonna try to remove the markings. Sorry, go ahead, Colin.
Oh my. And the circus just continues.
Right.
Apologies for that, everybody. But essentially, the three parties that have been filing lawsuits against the General Assembly map, the ACLU and the League, the Ohio Organizing Collaborative in conjunction with the Brennan Center, and the voting advocates who are working with the National Redistricting or National Democratic Redistricting Fund, all filed motions asking the Ohio Supreme Court again to hold the commission members to force them to come and show why they didn't comply with the court's order, and have a in-person hearing where they are put on the stand under oath, and they have to answer questions about why they willfully chose to forego an Ohio Supreme Court order. It is interesting this time. I know these motions have been filed in the past, but a subtle yet I think important distinction here is that up until this time on June 6th, when the commission didn't meet, they didn't produce a new map, they didn't do anything. The previous iterations, the commission, though it may have been a half-hearted effort or a, kind of tongue-in-cheek effort, they did meet. They did produce a new map. Whereas this time they simply did not. They openly and willfully made no effort. So that's a subtle point. However, it could be a cause for the members of the Supreme Court to actually go through and make these members come in and testify as to why they should not be held in contempt for defying the Supreme Court's order. If you and I were to go before a municipal court judge and willfully deny their order 5 times, I certainly don't think we would be getting off scot-free. And that should be just the same case in this scenario here. So those motions have been filed. We are awaiting a response from the Ohio Supreme Court. They could rule, they could order a decision next on either our motions to enforce or on just the lack of producing a new map. So we are kind of once again in a holding pattern here until we hear from the Ohio Supreme Court as to what's next. So there has been an appeal of the federal order that was issued by the federal panel implementing the third map. There was a appeal that was filed to the United States Supreme Court on behalf of the Simons parties, which is a group of Black pastors and community activists from the Mahoning Valley. They are requesting an appeal to the Supreme Court for a Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act claim. Essentially, they are alleging a racial gerrymander in the state General Assembly districts because they crack densely Black populated areas in Mahoning and Trumbull counties. There are a number of different things that could happen based off this appeal. First off, the Ohio Supreme Court could simply deny to hear the appeal, which would come as kind of a summary judgment, which means that that challenge would not, take any effect. They could agree to hear the case, but let the election under Map 3 continue, or they could, put what's called a TRO, or a temporary restraining order, on the General Assembly election for August 2nd while they hear that appeal. That appeal to SCOTUS was filed a couple days ago, and we should be hearing in relatively short order whether or not the Supreme Court will in fact decide to hear that case. It should come out as probably a batch of decisions in the next few days, so stay tuned to see if those yes, I just saw a question in the chat. It is it's a notice of appeal that they sent. The General Assembly case in the Southern District is one of those legal cases that any appeal automatically goes to SCOTUS. So it's just a direct appeal. So again, we are waiting to hear from the Supreme Court on the commission missing the June 6th deadline and the motions to enforce and to hold an in-person hearing. And then also we're waiting to hear from SCOTUS on a racial gerrymandering appeal from the Simmons parties. And that's where we stand finally on the General Assembly districts. So we can go to the next slide. We are also still currently litigating the congressional map that we are under. We have concluded our briefing schedule, and there is a link here so you can follow along on the docket like we all have this entire process. And we are currently awaiting a decision from the Ohio Supreme Court to hear whether or not the map that you see in front of you complies with the Ohio Constitution. Several arguments have been made in terms of throw the whole map out or fix a couple of the egregious districts in there. We'll have to wait and see what the Supreme Court says. In the event that the Supreme Court of Ohio should rule in our favor, they would give the General Assembly 30 days from the date of that order to pass a new congressional map. If they shouldn't be able to do that, or if they refuse to do that, then the Redistricting Commission will have another 30 days to draw a new congressional map. So I know we're put this on a broken record. We are waiting on the Ohio Supreme Court to issue a decision on the merits of this case as well. So that's a pretty brief update on the congressional map, but the last thing, just to reiterate, is that the maps that we are using are only going to be good for 2022, and they are still actively being litigated as we speak. So thank you, and I'll try to go back through the chat and try to answer as many questions as I can.
Oh, so Colin, do you want to start with this question? Why hasn't anyone been held in contempt already?
Colin, are you still there? I think he muted himself. I have asked him to unmute.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So that's a very difficult question to answer. A number of factors could be in play. I think what is most in play here is that, we know that only 4 of the Ohio Supreme Court justices, 4 of the 7, have any interest in pursuing these cases further. It seems as if Justices DeWine, Kennedy, and Fisher have, relegated themselves to not doing anything, kind of, disparaging their colleagues on the bench who are still, being active participants in this litigation and upholding the rule of law. I think also if contempt is brought in, I think that opens the door for the General Assembly to pursue impeachment charges against any of the Ohio Supreme Court justices. If you look at the makeup of the General Assembly, the Republicans in the General Assembly have all the votes they need in order to pursue impeachment charges, both in terms of convicting them in the Senate and actually, bringing charges in the House. That could be a consideration. They could very well not want to impose contempt on another branch of government. I hope that's not their reason. But again, I really can't say for sure. I think politics has really infected this entire process, and I don't believe that the Ohio Supreme Court exercising its full authority has been, has escaped that political considerations, unfortunately.
Thank you, Colin. And I know we're going to turn it to Catherine now. I just want to say about that hack, I just need to say this. I think the person who came on and hacked chose a random name and renamed themselves that name because the person whose name that they took, I know that wasn't them. That wasn't them doing the hack. So I just want to make that clear because that person has emailed me and is super, super upset about what happened. And so I want to clear that person's name and etc. Now I'm going to go back and Catherine is going to, I'm really happy that so many folks sent us questions. A lot of them were really tough questions, but we are going to do our best to answer them.
So the first one is from Mark, who says, is there any chance that someone will challenge the federal court, the federal panel and go all the way to the US Supreme Court? We know from this presentation that there is a challenge about racial gerrymandering. And, you know, usually when we're talking about gerrymandering, we've been talking about partisan gerrymandering. So it's not really clear what will happen with that. I suspect, and, you know, not part of the legal team on all of these things, but I suspect that the maps will not be challenged all the way to the US Supreme Court because it's not the friendliest place ever. Okay, so the next is from Rod. Why do the federal courts have jurisdiction over a totally state matter anyway? So this is the thing that gets me. So here we have the US Supreme Court in Rucho v. Common Cause deciding that partisan gerrymandering is not something that the federal courts should do anything about. They basically say in that decision, you know, that in fact, it's the state courts and state legislatures that need to address gerrymandering. And so it was completely, you know, upsetting when we're in this process where we're trying to actually get good maps and ensure that what's in the Ohio Constitution comes to fruition and we have these really good districts. But at the end of the day, the focus of the Republican lawsuit, and that's that Ganadakis lawsuit, was really on, hey, how in the world do we how do we have an election and how do we have it in a time? And so federal courts sometimes do step in if the state legislature doesn't act to establish a new primary, and clearly that needed to be done. So I think that's how it happened, but it is confusing and it is political, and it's sad to have had the Ohio Supreme Court act in a really reasonable bipartisan way. And yes, they haven't held them in contempt, but they have held their feet to the fire, repeatedly requesting that they get back to work, giving stronger and stronger instructions. And many of us watch those independent map makers really, really closely. So that's an incredibly difficult thing. The other question I have here is from Rob. Can districts be redrawn before the midterm elections? The answer to that is yes. And I think we should anticipate that will happen. So you have, you know, we know that the map that we're using for this year, for 2022, for Ohio House and Senate, that those are for just this year, based on what the panel said. We also know that there is for our congressional districts, that there is another lawsuit. So it's very possible that we will have new congressional districts as well. And so,
Catherine,
did you want to add something?
Well, no, I think that Rob actually meant, could they be redrawn before this November?
Oh, okay. All right. No, it's not. They're not going to be redrawn before this November.
Sadly.
And I'm sorry to say that. I took that as, hey, the next one, or what I took midterm as a yes, it's a midterm, but like I just took it as meaning the next one or in the middle of the term. Okay. And Mia, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No.
Now, Rob asked this question, which I think is very cool about Ohio. So in Ohio, we can make a decision to choose a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot when we go in to vote. That's how we actually become part of that political party. And so we can choose in the August primaries to ask for a Republican ballot, or we can ask for a Democratic ballot. You know, one of the things that is really important is accountability was built into this reform. And that means that whether it's the Ohio Redistricting Commission or state legislators, that in fact, we had expected them to be held accountable and to actually do the right thing. So when you think about selecting your ballot for the primary, you know, you can choose whether you want to participate and you want to make a statement that way. And then all of us will get to that November election and we can hold a variety of candidates that are on the Ohio Redistricting Commission accountable. I also, as we're thinking about kind of the general election, I think it's really important for us to be thinking about the next who else is going to be on that whole Ohio Supreme Court? We do know that the Chief Justice is actually term limited based on her age. So she will be leaving us at the end of this year. So we do need to be thinking about, making sure that we pick members of the Ohio Supreme Court that are focused on fair districts and on good representational fairness. So next question is about Nan Whaley.
Sorry.
So Nan, of course, is running for governor. And so whoever sits on the Ohio Redistricting Commission is incredibly important. So the governor, auditor, secretary of state, all across Ohio, we can vote on those. And, fair districts is a nonpartisan group, but we can really focus on ensuring that we ask candidates and we encourage voters to pay attention to how these elected officials behaved. We are talking about constitutional officers who violated the Ohio Constitution. And so many of us, participate in some activities that are more partisan, but Fair Districts is nonpartisan and really encourages us to ask all candidates about, representational fairness and what they're doing to take care of democracy. And just to keep that up so that all voters are thinking about, democracy. Yeah, next slide. Okay, so Jane is ready to just pick up our clipboards and actually go change the way that we do things. So, oh my God, I'm so ready to do this. Me too. So these are the things, just so you all know, that we're doing. We're doing the kind of things that you do prior to actually doing a citizen initiative. We're doing some polling. We're doing a ton of research. We're doing the kind of thing where we think about, well, how much will this actually cost? We're trying to figure out, how it is that we could distribute the work so that we can do this in a way that is also educational. This is a slow process. This isn't something that we can do quickly. And so for folks that are thinking, hey, I'm ready to go, me too, but I want to make sure that we do this super thoughtfully. So if you're somebody who is ready to go, if you want to participate in thinking through how it is that we should actually change the Ohio Constitution yet again, we will be starting some study groups very soon. So please, Jane, thank you for the question. And please get your clipboard ready, but know that it'll take a little bit of time. Okay, so now we have, would it be a violation of Ohio federal statute or an impeachable offense if it could be proven that some of or all of the Republican map makers conspired with each other to not create a bipartisan map? So this is one of the things that I think is really challenging. It is very clear that they took an oath. Many of us watched the members of the Ohio Redistricting Commission take an oath to follow the Ohio Constitution, and then they didn't do it. Now, it likely is an impeachable offense. I think the challenge is that we're in an election year. And so the best way to boot them is not an impeachment, but at the polls in November. But this is completely true. This is, the way that we think about, they made an oath and they violated the oath and we all watched them do it. That is impeachable. Not easy to impeach, but impeachable. Okay, next question. Does Ohio have an open record statute that could be used to secure records, emails, video recordings, and such communications? So one of the things that the lawsuits have been doing is doing all sorts of discovery. There's all sorts of good information about what was happening behind the scenes. So if you're somebody who is interested in kind of taking a deep dive, I would encourage you all to do a little bit of a look behind the scene. And Mindy is like, well, what about pulling out some of that information for you all? So there, like in the lawsuits, there are interesting things like the map making was done at the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. So there are those kinds of tidbits and inside information. So one of the things that I think is super clear is that as we think about Ohio's sunshine law and open meetings law and the lawsuits, we're going to get more and more information. One of the things that's really interesting is that Lisa Worm, who is not here today, but she spent a lot of energy kind of trying to put together the story of the map making. And so we're working on that. We've also, so the Fair Districts is working on that. And then the other thing that Common Cause has been doing, so that's the league that's working a little bit on that report. We've been working on taking the timeline that we share every time and actually making it more interactive so folks can actually look at it and understand it better, and so that we can take some of that legalese out of it. We do know that so many more people are aware of gerrymandering, but it's going to take a lot of work, right? It's going to take a lot of work to move from where we are right now to actually collecting signatures and getting ready for the ballot. And so as we think about this is Amy's question. I'm going to hand this to Mia. I appreciate everything you tried to do, but what's the point now?
So, and this is a very genuine question, and I feel you. I understand that it feels like we're just hitting our head against the wall. But the truth is, we have to stick together. You guys are an incredible army, and if we're really going to do a ballot initiative, oh my goodness, we're going to need each one of us to be 20 people. And everyone is really well informed. Everyone is educating their friends, their neighbors, their colleagues, and we need to stick together. And it's also true that redistricting is kind of still going on. I mean, these maps now are just for 2022. If we are going to have new maps in 2024, we're going to have to start to draw them. The sooner, the better. So, I think one thing we've learned is that this is never going to end. I mean, we do have to pace ourselves. We're going to take a break from the huddle in August. But we've got to keep spreading the word about how important this is and who's doing it properly and who isn't. We have to fight to elect candidates who, care about democracy and fair districts, and to ask candidates what they, how they would support fair maps, et cetera. So we've got to keep going, guys, and we really appreciate everything that you're doing to keep going. And with that, thank you so much, Catherine, for answering all those tricky questions. I know there's a lot more in the chat, but I also don't want to go on too long. We'll scour the chat and we will, try to answer any that we haven't answered yet. But I wanted to just kind of give you again some things to do, because you guys are so great and we know that you are always busy. Letters to the editor are still important. Opinion pieces, they're important. Take that testimony that you wrote and turn it into an op-ed or a guest article, or write a letter to the editor. We've still got that sign-on statement. Sherry McMillan has been making incredibly great graphics. I'm going to show you an example in a minute for Twitter and for Instagram. She's got them in that folder. You can share them. We really appreciate what she's been doing. Talk to your candidates, talk about fair districts. It should be the first thing that you mention. How are they going to fight gerrymandering? How are they going to support democracy in general? Share information about the Ohio Supreme Court and how important it is, and how important it is to have justices who care about the things that we do. And I'm going to show you a palm card that we have that you can help distribute at festivals and fairs this summer. Do voter registration, that's important. Join election protection team, all of those things that are boosting democracy, those are all things that are going to help. So here's the example of one of the graphics that Sherry put together with some of the quotes from the things that you guys have been saying about fair districts, with some pictures, and we can share those on social media and show the world that Ohioans want fair maps. We do. And here's an image of our beloved Tiffany, who has been at a bunch of festivals this summer so far. And we have these great cards that talk about the rights, the kinds of things that the Supreme Court actually deals with and the rights that they defend, and how important it is to vote down ballot. So if you're going to be knocking any doors this summer, or if you're going to be at festivals, let us know that you want some of these cards, and we can share some with you. We also want to invite you all to save the date of Saturday, September 18th. We are going to have a volunteer appreciation picnic and party at Alum Creek Park. We have rented a shelter, you know, we don't have the exact time yet, but it'll be an afternoon event. And, you know, we hope to have all kinds of fun things there, and we'll be treating you because you guys are awesome. And, you know, we want to show our thanks for everything that you've done. I also want you to donate to Fair Districts and all the coalition groups that are part of it, because, you know, we're still working, and this is supposed to have been done long ago, but we're still working, and we're fighting for fair maps, and we definitely still need your support. So that's a link there, and we will send that out as well. And we don't ask very often, so we appreciate it. And that's pretty much it, guys. As I said, there's no huddle in August, but we will have one in July. And these are all the articles that I put in that are about the recent lawsuits that have been filed, and then just some general useful links. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. We'll share all of this with you, of course. So I don't know if Catherine or Colin, if you've been monitoring the chat, if you want to answer any of those questions. I see that Jean Henderson has her hand up, and I will actually unmute you, Jean, and you can go ahead and ask your question. I think if she's still there, she disappeared. All right, well, Catherine or Colin, do you have any questions there that you would like to answer?
So I did notice that Anne had suggested that the Dayton Daily News is encouraging guest columns about issues. So that's the other thing. You know, one of the things that can happen is we just stop kind of asking or trying to get the word out. So it's worth checking to see like what's going on with your local paper, thinking about doing letters to the editor or op-eds. And I also noticed that Jean is off mute. Jean, are you ready?
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. The graphic that talks about that was made up that has a picture and a little statement. Is there a shareable one where each of us can put in our own statements and share more broadly?
Good question. We can certainly make one that is kind of blank. The only thing is we made them on Canva. So if you, I mean, Canva's free, and you know, you can
I use it.
Yeah, so we can certainly make a template for you. That's a good idea. So we will make sure to do that for both Twitter and Instagram.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I've been looking at all the questions. I think the biggest challenge for me is sometimes the answers are so hard to take, or they seem nonsensical. So like, as we work through this, why haven't they been held in contempt? Well, I don't know. They definitely should have been. There, you know, some of these things, you know, it's hard to actually figure out. And so I just wanted to let everybody know how, you know, even though this was a little bit of a rocky meeting, there was one point where I thought that a tree was going to come in. It's raining so hard. And certainly an annoying meeting. I was like a little interruption there. It's just good to see everybody, and I'm just glad that we're going to get together in September. I look forward to seeing you very soon, and we'll have our meeting in July. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.